We're going to be perfecting the Hexblade, which is going to turn your Warlock from a ranged caster into an unstoppable melee powerhouse that is still able to use some spells at range and is going to entirely rely on the Charisma stat. For this reason, it's also a very fun character to play, as it's going to offer you plenty of roleplay options that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. I'm also going to be telling you which classes you are going to want to multi-class with the Warlock to create the most powerful and effective combinations possible, as well as tell you the ability distribution, the feats to pick, the best races to play with this class, and what equipment you should be looking out for. With all of that said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero and welcome to the Hexblade Perfected. With this build, our main priority is to get Pact of the Blade, as it will allow us to summon a packed weapon or bind the one you are already wielding, making you proficient with it in case you weren't, and allowing you to use your Charisma modifier instead of your Strength or Dexterity modifier. But before we get there, we still have to select a couple of very important things. At level 1, Warlocks already get to pick their subclass, and the one we're going to choose is going to be the Great Old One. With this, we get Mortal Reminder, which makes it so that whenever we land a critical hit, that creature and any nearby enemies are going to be frightened until the end of their next turn. Something very important to note is that once you reach Warlock level 5 with Pact of the Blade, you'll receive an extra attack, which, as the name implies, allows you to perform a second weapon attack. Now, in theory, you should not be able to stack this extra attack with another one that you get from a different class like Fighter or Paladin. However, for whatever reason it may be, you are currently able to stack these two extra attacks together. I'm not sure if it's intended, but just in case, I'll be showcasing 4 different builds in this video, 2 with this possible bug and 2 that don't use it. They are all very powerful and allow for different playstyles, so go with whichever one you prefer. For the most part, the game isn't difficult, even on Tactician, especially when using the Hexblade, so don't worry about it too much, just go with the one you think sounds the most fun. If you're starting a new character, the race you will want to pick is going to be the Half-Orc, as when you get to 0 HP, rather than being down, you're going to regain 1 hit point. More importantly, however, you also get Savage Attacks, which makes it so that whenever you score a critical hit with a melee weapon, an additional dice is going to be added to your total damage, which, as you will see, is going to add up to a ton of damage. That being said, these builds can still function extremely well even on Tactician with just about any race, so you don't need to worry about this. As for your ability score, you want to go with a distribution that is something like this. You can further reduce your Charisma by 1 or 2 and put them in Constitution or Dexterity instead if you can get your hands on Volo's Eye or the Hacks +1 to an ability score of your choice. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the first build. You are a brutal force of nature and will unleash your wrath on anyone who dares stand in your way. With 2 extra attacks and Action Surge giving you 3 more attacks, on top of the bonus action from the Great Weapon Master feat, if you get close to the enemy, you'll be hitting them until they are dead. This build is all about non-stop aggression. You'll be going 5 levels into Warlock, so you can grab Eldritch Blast of course, as well as Bone Chill. I also like to take Friends for roleplay, but you can pick any other cantrip. As for the spells, at level 5 you will want to have Hex, Misty Step, Hold Person and Counterspell. I would also advise you to pick up Darkness if you're not a Tiefling, as it will blind enemies and give you advantage with the Devil's Sight Eldritch Invocation. Speaking of which, you'll be able to pick 3 of these, my 2 other recommendations being Fiendish Vigor to gain temporary hit points, and finally Agonizing Blast to add your Charisma modifier to your Eldritch Blast. At level 4 you'll be able to pick a feat. The feats that you want for this build are mainly going to be Great Weapon Master so that you gain 10 extra damage when using a 2-handed weapon, albeit at the cost of a -5 attack roll, though you can toggle that on and off in your passives. But you also get the benefit of being able to hit another melee weapon attack as a bonus action after you land a critical hit. Sentinel and Polar Master are also very good options, but they are definitely not as good, in particular with this build. Don't forget to also pick ability score improvement to increase your charisma as much as possible. Once you reach level 5 and get that extra attack, you will want to multi-class into Fighter. At level 1, you will be able to pick a fighting style, and of course we're going with the Great Weapon Fighting as it's going to pair nicely with our two-handed weapon, making it so that whenever we roll a 1 or a 2 on damage, we get to reroll it. You also gain Second Wind as a bonus action to be able to heal yourself, regaining 1d10 plus your fighter level in hit points. At level 2, you'll be able to get Action Surge, which allows you to gain another action in the same turn. And as I explained before, the extra attacks that you're going to get from Fighter as well as Warlock are both going to benefit from Action Surge. At level 3, you get to choose your subclass, and while these are all good options, but what we really want is the Champion subclass, as it will make it so that the number you need to roll a critical hit will be reduced by 1, effectively critting on a 19 and a 20. And this of course pairs extremely well with Great Weapon Master, and even better if you're playing as a half-orc. At level 4 you get yet another feat or an ability score improvement, so you can boost your charisma or go with one of the feats I mentioned earlier. And at level 5 we get our second extra attack, which is going to pair with our Pact of the Blade Warlocks. And because in the case of the fighter specifically, you get another feat at level 6, we're going to add that extra level. So if you have not reached 20 charisma yet, you'll be able to get there with this level. And if you are already at 20 charisma, you can also add to your constitution or pick Sentinel or Polar Master, for example. Now, when it comes to the final level, Champion level 7 doesn't really offer you too much. You get better jumps, and you also get to add half your proficiency bonus to strength, dexterity, and constitution checks you're not proficient in, which can be helpful, but I personally don't find that amazing, so I rather take this level to dip into another class. My recommendations are Cleric or Sorcerer, as they will give us 2 level 1 spell slots, which we are desperately lacking as we only have 2 level 3 spell slots from Warlock. Plus we also get a few other bonuses on top depending on the subclass we choose. This is a very powerful iteration of the Hexblade as you really become an unstoppable force. But it's also the least flashy version as you don't have Divine Smite for that extra oomph. That being said, with this build you don't get as many spell slots even after the dip, but that's okay as you won't be using them as much offensively. So you will be primarily casting spells like Misty Step, Hex, Hold Person, and even Counterspell. For that reason, equipment that will allow you to cast these spells for free can also be really helpful. Other pieces of equipment that you'll want to have are the Killer Sweetheart Ring, which will guarantee a critical hit on your next attack roll after defeating an enemy. Additionally, by having the Darkness spell along with Devil's Sight, you'll be able to take advantage of equipment such as the Dark Justiciar Mail to deal more damage when you are obscured, or the Dark Justiciar Helmet, which will further reduce the number needed to hit a critical hit down to 17 while also being obscured. And don't forget the Illicit Power Luck of the Four Realms, which can turn a successful attack roll into a critical hit. Now let's move on to the second build of the video. The Dark Knight clad in obsidian armor, a paradoxical guardian of light veiled in shadows, wielding unholy incantations in service of a righteous cause. This time around we're going to be mixing Warlock with a Paladin. We still want 5 levels of Warlock as we want to get that extra attack, so everything as before is pretty much the same, except you don't want to pick up Misty Step from the Warlock spells as you'll be getting it from Paladin at level 5. Now at Paladin level 1 you'll be met with the choice of 3 different oaths. There's also the Oathbreaker option, but we're not really interested in that. We're going to pick Oath of the Ancients as it's the most reliable out of these options. So with just a level 1 Paladin dip, you already get plenty of sustain. Now at level 2, that's when we get our Divine Smite, which will of course also use our Charisma modifier to deal damage. We also get to select a fighting style, and just like with the fighter, we're going to pick Great Weapon Fighting as it's going to benefit us from using our two-handed weapon. The spells here don't really matter too much, as for the most part we're going to be using our spell slots to deal damage with our Divine Smite, and even the Smite spells that are present here actually deal less damage than Divine Smite. So my only real recommendations here are to pick up Divine Favor and Bless. At level 4 4 we get to select an ability score improvement or a feat, and just like with the previous build, you want to pick Great Weapon Master or to increase your charisma. And at level 5 we'll be getting our extra attack, and at this point we will have 4 level 1 spell slots and 2 level 2 spell slots. From the prepared spells here you can also pick up Magic Weapon, but more importantly we get 2 spells from the Oath of the Ancients, one of them being Moonbeam, which isn't amazing, but you also get Misty Step, which is what we really wanted. You could alternatively pick Oath of Vengeance, which also gives you Misty Step, but it also gives you Hold Person as well as Hunter's Mark, and you already have Hold Person from the Warlock spell list, and Hunter's Mark is essentially the same thing as Hex, so in my opinion Oath of the Ancients ends up being a better option because it provides you and your team with more sustain. We're going to multi-class into Fighter, so you end up getting Action Surge, and just like with the previous build, you get to take even more advantage of those 2 extra attacks. Now the cool thing about this build is that you are a lot tankier than the previous build, and while you may not be fishing for crits as often, you can still use the same equipment, but you have more spell slots and you also have access to Divine Smite to dish out a ton of damage in a single round. In my opinion, this is the most consistent version of the build, as well as the most powerful one. But we still have 2 more builds that I want you to take a look at, and these 2 builds are in my opinion a lot more fun to play. With the first one being what I call the Divine Fiend. A paladin sworn to protect the weak, but in the path of his righteous crusade, he sees himself forced to make a pact with a fiend, just like the ones he sought to defeat. With this build you'll be going 3 levels of Warlock, but this time we're going to pick the Fiend subclass. So you gain temporary hit points equal to your charisma modifier whenever you kill an enemy. Our cantrip and spell selection is still going to be the same, but we don't pick Misty Step from the Warlock spell list as we will also be multi-classing into Paladin. And just like with the previous build, we're going to pick Oath of the Ancients, but we'll be going 8 levels of Paladin instead. With these extra Paladin levels, you'll be getting Aura of Protection and Aura of Warding, with Aura of Protection making it so that yourself and your allies gain a bonus to saving throws equal to your Charisma modifier. And thanks to Oath of the Ancients, Aura of Warding makes it so that you and your nearby allies only take half damage from spells, which is just crazy. So with this build you don't need to save a Warlock spell slot, just in case you need to use Counterspell to save an ally or even yourself from a spell that would deal a ton of damage. Because for the entirety of combat, you only take half damage. And this doesn't even take up a spell slot or anything. You just activate it once at camp and that's it. And because we reach level 8 with the Paladin, we get yet another feat or ability score improvement. Now for this build in particular, I think it's best if we don't go Great Weapon Master and instead choose to go with Polar Master or even Sentinel, as we get these 2 auras that are going to not only benefit your character, but your allies if they are within range as well. With Sentinel, whenever an enemy is within melee range and attacks an ally, you can use your reaction to make a weapon attack against that enemy. You also gain advantage on opportunity attacks, and whenever you hit an enemy with an opportunity attack, that enemy can no longer move for the rest of the turn. And with Polar Master, whenever you use a glaive, a halberd, a quarterstaff or a spear, you can use a bonus action to attack with the butt of your weapon. And of course, this attack is going to use the same ability modifier as the primary attack. Additionally, you also get to make opportunity attacks whenever a target comes within range. And if you choose to go with either of these feats, I would recommend you picking up a glaive. For one, because Polar Master does not work with a greatsword, and for Sentinel because glaive simply has extra reach, so it is going to trigger more often. Although you can still go with a greatsword and simply deal more damage. For this final level, there are 3 different options in my opinion. You can either pick Warlock level 4 so you get another ability score improvement, or keep yourself in Paladin and go to level 9 so you gain 2 level 3 spell slots, and in the case of Oath of the Ancients, Protection from Energy, which is a level 3 spell that can grant resistance to different elements, as well as Plant Growth, which is another level 3 spell that creates an enemy where enemies walk slower, having their movement speed divided by 4. These aren't amazing spells, but getting those extra spell slots can be nice. But the third alternative is to yet again get a single level dip into another class. with my recommendation being the Life Domain Cleric, which is going to add +2 to our healing spells on top of our Wisdom modifier, but I also think that getting a single level of Storm Sorcery can be very helpful, as you get Tempestuous Magic, which means that after casting a spell, you can use a bonus action to fly until the end of your turn without receiving opportunity attacks, and you can fly up to 9 meters, so this can help you with your movement. With these multi-class options, you also get 2 level 1 spell slots, which of course aren't as good as getting 2 level 3 spell slots, but I still think these are valuable options to add to your build. But we still have one more build to take a look at, and this is by far my favorite build out of all of these, both in terms of combat as well as roleplay. The Wandering Knight travels from village to village, spreading tales of his valor. Wielding an agile blade, he inspires those he saves from evil and injustice, while leaving some questioning the mysterious power he commands. For this build, we are also going 3 levels into Warlock, and we're also taking some levels into Paladin. We're using the Fiend subclass, and our spell list is going to be pretty much the same as before, but when you multi-class into Paladin, we're going to pick a different fighting style. For the Wandering Knight, we're going to be picking the Dueling fighting style, which makes it so that when wielding a melee weapon in one hand and no melee weapon on the other, you gain a +2 to your damage rolls with this weapon. And since we're using the Dueling fighting style, when picking your packed weapon, we're going to select a rapier, as weapons that come with the versatile trait do not benefit from the Dueling fighting style. And while you might have guessed from the description of this character, we are multi-classing into Bard, and it's actually a very effective and powerful combination. So as I said, we're getting 3 levels of Warlock, as well as 6 levels of Paladin, so we go with Oath of the Ancients, get Divine Smite and extra attack, as well as Aura of Protection, and then at level 10 we multi-class into Bard, which will give us Inspiration and some more spellcasting. And all of these spells are going to benefit from our Charisma modifier. So you can get spells like Shatter, Phantasmal Force, Cloud of Daggers, and many others which are very good. At level 2 we get Song of Rest, which means we get an additional short rest, which isn't particularly amazing, but it is a quality of life benefit. And we also get Jack of all trades, which adds half your proficiency bonus to ability checks you aren't proficient in, which is a good way to round out your build. But at level 3 not only do we get quite a few more spell slots, but we also get Expertise, which allows our character to double their proficiency bonus on a skill, but we also get to pick our subclass, and of course we're going to select College of Swords, which allows you to pick a different fighting style to add to your character. Now the only 2 options that College of Swords offers are Dueling and 2-weapon fighting, which means that at this point you're going to have to respec your character, and as a paladin you select the defense fighting style, which is going to add a +1 to your AC, and then once you finally get to College of Swords Bard, you add the dueling style. But of course you also get Blade Flourish from the College of Swords Bard, which allows you to spend your bardic inspiration charges to perform a variety of different actions whenever you attack an enemy. So think of Blade Flourish as a more mobile alternative to Divine Smite that can give you options from increasing your armor class, to attacking multiple enemies, or even pull yourself toward an enemy or push them away from you. You become a lot more versatile by going into Bard, and you're also adding spell slots, therefore having more uses of Divine Smite. Now, as for your feats, with this character in specific, more often than not I find myself focusing on ability score improvements rather than picking a feat, because you cannot take advantage of Great Weapon Master or Polar Master. You could use Sentinel, but I don't think it's going to be particularly amazing. You could take Defensive Duelist, which makes it so that whenever you're attacked, you can use a reaction to increase your armor class, likely causing the attack to miss. This can be a pretty decent option to use, but personally I would rather take Alert or even Mobile. With this you end up with a character that has pretty high AC, 4 level 1 spell slots, 5 level 2s, and 3 level 3 spell slots. So overall, a very good character in terms of being efficient and powerful, but it also has the very good bright side of getting the versatility of the Bard and also having so many roleplay options with these 3 different classes. The best dialogue options you can get by being a specific class come from the Warlock, the Barbarian, and the Bard, and in this case you get 2 of those, so that just makes the game a whole lot more fun. These are, in my opinion, the 4 best multi-class options you can get with the Hexblade Warlock, So please tell me what you think of these options in the comments below, and what you think of the idea of doing one of these build perfected videos in the future. Please subscribe to the channel if you have enjoyed this video, as it really does help me out. As always, my name is Dark Hero, and thank you very much for watching.